Oops.
Hopefully y'all don't do a face plant during the middle of the live stream. Guess we'll see. Anyways.
I was going to say, I will not be the quick one to try to go for the camera.
No, that would be me. I will have to be the one to do that should it occur. We shall see. But good evening, everybody. So, I'm here. Vincent's here. Vincent's checking out.
Vincent wants to eat the tree. He's been wanting to eat the tree all evening.
And his brother's been climbing. I don't know where his brother... I think his brother went to bed, which is probably for the best.
Yes.
Because, yeah, cats. But, anyways.
Cats and shiny things.
They have been in a mood tonight. They must be trying to rack up the naughty points to make sure that they get some... Yep. Get some extra coal in the stocking for them.
For the fireplace.
For the fire, because fire makes them happy. So, yeah. Anyways. What am I doing?
I don't know. Are you checking in with comments to see if that's available?
I'm trying. Hopefully I'll getting there.
Okay.
Well, you'll see.
Vincent, do you want to share the first story with me?
Ah, there we are.
Maybe, kind of. Or are you going to finally settle down?
Okay, so yes. So we got Rick, we got Alex. So yes, good evening, everybody. And do we have any liquid spirits? I am partaking in local favorite. Last week we had the Dipped in Folly from our friends down at Richmond Brewing.
Yep.
This week we have a Richmond Classic.
Hardywood.
Hardywood.
No, it's Hardywood.
Yep, so gingerbread stout, but it is their
fluffy
variant. So I don't know if you can see that, but fluffy. So it is pretty good. Fluffy means that it has the marshmallow flavor in it, and it is very, very good. But favorite Richmond seasonal beverage? That is a good question.
Okay, mine is a mixture. It's a beer cocktail. It's gingerbread stout and Homestead Creamery eggnog.
Yes, that is
my favorite.
Quite good. So definitely enjoy that very much.
I'm currently drinking a hot toddy.
Yeah. But yes, do love the gingerbread stout with with some of that eggnog.
Mm-hmm. It's really good with Christmas pancake too.
Yes, the Christmas pancake, which is the one with the maple syrup. So that is quite good. But there's so many good Christmas brews around, just locally.
Yeah.
I do like the gingerbread stout and its variants. I like the Dipped in Folly from our friends down there at Richbrow. There's also one Christmas at Midnight from Midnight Brewing, which I also very much appreciate. So there's quite a few options to choose from.
I also like a good maple bourbon and a maple tea for a hot toddy, Alex. If you have not tried that, must.
Yes. So, anyways, I don't know if y'all are getting. I'm getting a flash on my screen here periodically. So I don't know if y'all are getting that. If you can't hear or see us at any point,
Please let us know.
Please let us know.
We don't have a third tonight, so it's just the two of us.
Yes. So yeah, hopefully we won't have any insurmountable issues this evening. But well, it is the digital realm, which is.
And we are in Mercury retrograde.
Yes. So not exactly our strong point. We like the storytelling, but the digital stuff doesn't always cooperate with us. So anyways, it's only been a week since we last saw you.
Not much has changed.
Not too much has changed in the last week. But yeah, so we're back 2 weeks in a row so that we can share with you some more Victorian era Christmas ghost stories.
From the U.S.
Yep, this from the U.S. And just like last week, we have 2 stories to share with you. So we thought we might be able to shoehorn 3, but... no,
they were a little too long.
It wasn't going to work. So
hey, we got a script for next year, though.
Yep. So put it on your calendar. January 6th or December 16th, 2024. We will have Victorian Christmas Ghost Stories Volume 4. Yes, we might be planning just a little bit in advance, but
hey, I'm working to get us through June right now.
So yeah, we got a lot going on. We will be back. I will say right before we even dive into the stories, we will be back in 2 weeks. which does put us on New Year's Day.
Right in the new year with ghost stories.
Yes. And we're going to get back into the state rotation.
Yes.
Which one were we doing?
Oregon,
that's right.
Pretty sure Oregon was first.
Oregon was first, and then
Rhode Island,
and then
Arkansas.
So yes, we are going to knock out 3 states come January with all kinds of fun, spooky stories to share. But in the meantime,
we're going to start here.
We are going to start here, and before we dive right in, cheers, everybody.
Cheers.
Hope that you all are having a very happy holiday season thus far, and that it continues for you through the next couple of weeks. So cheers to that.
Cheers. Yes. All right, so this one's called A Christmas Ghost, and it's by Lucy A. Randall. Now, her married name was Comfort, and she was from 1836 to 1914. She was the daughter of a county school superintendent in New York, and she was actually already in print at the age of 13 and was widely published by the time this story actually appeared in Frank Leslie's illustrated newspaper on December 26th of 1857. Now, stories where some living being having no intention of portraying a ghost is nonetheless perceived as one often end with a marriage to a lovely sleepwalker of a laugh or a braying mule outside. Not so here. Una, don't you dare.
Una! Everybody can see the back of your head. Why don't you come here? You can get on video properly.
I don't know. It was the day before Christmas, a bright, freezing day with a drizzle of blue skies and a sharp cold wind, which spread a coating of glittering rime over the piled-up snowbanks on the roadside and the white fields and hills in the distance. The long shadows of the evening were slowly creeping across the landscape when a crowded stagecoach came lumbering up to the quiet of a little village hotel, one of the central counties of Maine. "Staunton, sir," cried the driver, pulling up his steaming horses with a jerk. "You get out here, I believe. Staunton, already? Seems to be but moments since we left Hillsborough." A pale and weary-looking man glancing around him with a bewildered air as he slowly descended from the vehicle. "Yes, I think we've done it in pretty good time," responded the driver, tossing the mailbags upon the piazza steps and clipping off with his whip with a bit of snow and the sprigs of cedar and holly with which his horses' heads were garnished. "Careful with the little girl there, all right?" He cracked his whip in the resounding air, and once more the heavenly laden stage rolled away across the frozen roads in a fiery sunset, which was blazing behind the pine thickets off to the far west. "A strange couple that," observed the red-faced, jovial passenger who sat beside the driver on the box. "No luggage but a basket, and they've been riding all day." His face was tied up in furs and handkerchiefs, till nothing but the tip of his nose was visible, but there was a healthy, genial tone in his bluff voice. A sort of character that was with the very bit of ivy twined around his hat, which had been snatched up from some cottage porch in the day's progress. "Well, it is strange to say the least," remarked the driver thoughtfully, as he leaned over to the box to catch the last glimpse of the strangers. "For such a couple to be traveling together in the country, and they look so foreign, too. And the child, a pretty, bright-eyed little thing she is, doesn't look to fit brace such wind as this." The stout passenger pulled his handkerchief close to his ears as the piercing wind swept around a cluster of protecting woods. The driver buttoned his coat tighter, and with a loud cry to his horses, and the stage dashed on its way along the winding, snowy road. Meanwhile, the pair, who had so excited the curiosity of their fellow travelers, hurried across the village street. The man might have been about 45 years of age. He was tall, pale, and slender, with a brow seamed with premature wrinkles. The child, on the contrary, was a lovely little creature, with soft, earnest eyes and a sweet Italian face. "Are you warm enough, Ninette?" asked the man, feeling the slight form cling closer to his side as a freezing blast shook the leafless trees about their heads. "Oh yes, Papa, oh yes," she answered cheerfully. "But this is not our home. The driver said it was Stanton, and I thought we were to go somewhere near Deptford." "So we are," said the father, with a melancholy smile and an answer to her eager upturned face. But Deptford is, by itself, a lonely old place, and no stage route passes within 6 or 7 miles of it. 6 or 7 miles, repeated the child sadly, and her large, lustrous eyes turned first to the long road that lay before them, and then to the crimson fire in the western heaven. I know it's a long way, Nina, said the father hopefully, but we will be there soon. I've walked this road as a boy many a time, and if you keep up a brave heart, it'll be no distance at all. I would have engaged a horse and a carriage at Stoughton, but for this reason, pet, and a stern reason it is. He tried to smile as he held up a light green purse, with only a small silver coin gleaming through its network. Oh, we'll walk, said little Nina, laughing. It's Christmas Eve, you know, and all the good saints and spirits will be around us to help us. Ah, you little Italian, said her father, pressing his tiny hand closer to his own. Your brain is full of old Ginta stories. And Christmas Eve in America is not like Christmas Eve of foreign countries. No crucifixes, no lights and decorations, no forms and ceremonies. Only a time of great faith and hope, and time, I trust, for reconciliation of all old breaches and separations. He spoke the last of the words with a faint, uncertain tone and a deep sigh. Oh, shoot.
Oh, you just closed it.
I didn't mean to. I find it. Give me a minute. That's right.
Nina was silent. Child as she was, she had already learned to respect her father's changing moods, and she knew from his tone that some vague fear or bitter memory was at his heart. Nanita, he resumed in a moment, you saw no such bright winter landscapes as this in Italy. How white the snow glitters on the slopes and how blue the sky is. Do you see those pine trees that stand out so bravely among the bare oaks and beeches, and that blue-green cedar that towers by itself like a hoary king? It is beautiful, I know, she said softly, but it is not like the orange groves and olive trees of home. He said nothing, but bent down to smooth the raven hair from her white brow and to draw the mantle closer around her slender throat as they walked on in silence, each absorbed in thought. She was musing on the 1,000 legends and memories associated with the holy hours of Christmas Eve in that bright, imaginative clime where she was born, and already her vivid fancy had peopled the clear, wintry sky with saints and angels innumerable. He was wrapped in thought of his youth, along with the familiar haunts his weary footsteps were not treading. It was on a Christmas Eve 20 years ago that he had left his home, left it in anger, with a hot flush on his cheek and an angry word upon his lip. How well he remembered the hour in which he had been banished, the quiet, subdued exultation of his only brother, younger than himself by several years, but older far in the calendar of strong will and stealthy purpose. But what were his own boyish excesses and mad extravagance compared with the dull, ceaseless malice of that enemy household? And he remembered when he had pleaded to see his mother only for an instant to say farewell, that triumphant gleam in the cavernous eyes, the stern, relentless message that left no further room for hope or fear was delivered, as from his mother's own lip. God pardon him, but he could not forgive that brother even now. And Rose, the fair New England maiden, was she dead, or had she too learned to hate his very name? But all suspense would soon be ended. He was drawing nearer the old home with every step, and he approached it, a worn, weary, disappointed man who had dwelt for 20 years on a foreign shore, and during all that time had never once exchanged a word or message with his native land. Perhaps they were all dead, perhaps... But no, he could not bear to think that their hearts might be hardened still. He would trust to his mother's old love and to the holy influence of Christmas Eve. The sad, cold moonlight was penciling the dark outline of the little church of Deepford on the snow, when he toiled wearily past carrying Nanita in his arms. A mile yet, a long, cold mile. There was a faint light gleaming through the stained glass window of the unpretending church, and the door stood ajar. The old man who had the charge of its decorations had been giving the finishing touch to the wreaths of Princess Pine and ivy and cedar boughs, which hung around the altar and under the emblazoned glass, whose tints of amber and purple he remembered so well. Though it was 20 years since, he still recollected the old customs of Christmas Eve at Deepford. He softly pushed the door open and looked in. No one was there, but a few sprays of red-berried holly and a cluster or two of mistletoe, gathered from the old dead trees in the wood beyond, lay in the aisle, and one lamp was burning in a carved niche. He turned away from the porch again. An old man came whistling along the road, swinging a lantern as he walked. It was old Simon Giles, the sexton, looking just as he had been wont to look, only the hair was whiter and the wrinkles deeper. Richard Chester forgot that he was an outcast and a wanderer. His heart leaped up at the sight of this weather-beaten old man, the first familiar face he had seen. The white, icy radiance fell full upon his own haggard countenance as he stood on the porch, and the instant the old man saw the worn features, he dropped his lantern and uttered a shrill cry, as if struck by mortal terror, and fled with wild speed along the road, leaving the wondering wayfarer alone in the winter night.
Oops.
The curtain rises on another scene. The old-fashioned house at Deepford, where Richard Chester's boyhood had been passed. It stands in the midst of a wide and sloping lawn, whose descent is dotted by spreading cedars and evergreens. Without, there is the pure moonlight and the black, sleeping shadows of the motionless trees. Within, the cheerful gleam of wax candles and a merry fire quivering through rich red draperies. A little group is gathered around the wide fireplace, where spires of dancing flame are stealing in and out like serpents, though a massive pile of logs and the red sparks are flying in miniature whirlwinds up the chimney. It is a very large room, and although it is bright and warm just around the social circle, deep shadows linger in every angle of the apartment, and the dim canvas of the old family portraits is almost entirely in darkness. The moonlight streams upon the carpet opposite the large bow window, and now and then the rude cross on the walls, formed of ivy and holly, and the cedar boughs above the mantel, stir softly as a door is shut or opened. Mrs. Chester, bent with years and grief, was sitting musing by the hearth, with a subdued mist of tears in her gentle eyes, and, close at her side, reclined a pale and lovely lady, watching with timid, frightened glance the dark-browed man opposite. It was very much the gaze which the fascinated bird may be supposed to direct towards the baleful serpent. Joseph Chester, the man whom she regarded with such manifest dread and terror, stood leaning against the chimney-piece, with a heavy cloud on his dark brow. His sunken and glowing eyes were fixed intent on the fire, and there was not one tender or gentle line in all the wrinkles that furrowed his brow and lip. "It is Christmas Eve," said the old lady, breaking a long silence, "and still it does not seem as if Christmas were so near. 20 years tonight since Richard went away, 18 since he died." At the mention of Richard's name, a thrill ran through the slight frame of the younger lady, Joseph Chester's wife, but the next instant she glanced timidly up and met the sinister eyes of her husband. "These are strange memories, mother," said Joseph sternly. "I cannot help it, Joseph. I have thought much of poor Richard lately. If I could only have seen him before he went away and told him that I loved and hoped for him still, but you would not allow it. If he could but have known that my poor husband forgave him on his deathbed." "Mother, this is folly," interrupted Chester almost fiercely. "On Christmas Eves I think of him oftenest, and it's at such times as this, when long-parted families meet once more, and happy households groups sit round their blazing fires, I cannot but remember my oldest born and wonder where his lonely grave is made."
Chester turned away impatiently and walked towards the window, while Rose stole her hand softly into that of her mother-in-law, as if to express a silent, loving sympathy. What is that? Cried Mrs. Chester, starting from her chair, and a moment afterward that as a confused noise reached her ears from the servants' rooms. Chester turned quickly, and at the same time old Simon Giles rushed in, pale and trembling, his hair standing upright, and his eyes distended wildly. "Simon, what is the matter?" cried the old lady. "Speak, you fool," said Chester sternly. "What do you mean by terrifying us in this manner?" "I've seen his ghost, Mr. Joseph. As sure as I'm a living man, I've seen his ghost," faltered old Giles, clinging to the chair for support. "His ghost? Whose, you fool?" asked Chester, turning livid. "Mr. Richard's, your own brother's ghost." Mrs. Chester's face was as white as ashes as she sank back powerless into her chair, still holding the chill, nevertheless hand of Rose, who leaned trembling on her shoulder. "Are you insane, man?" demanded Chester in a deep, stifled voice. "Or are you drunk?" "Mr. Joseph, it stood there in the church porch, looking at me full in the face. I'd been over home to get the hammer and the nails to fasten up a wreath of ivy that had fallen down, and when I returned, it was in the porch." "It again? Simon Giles, do not trifle with me. Speak what you mean." "Your brother's ghost, the ghost of a man 18 years dead." An awful silence fell on the group, and you could almost hear the beating of their hearts, while the fire snapped and crackled, and the old clock, speaking from amid its holly garlands, struck 9 with a hollow sound. "Simon, you may go," Chester said sternly, "and the next time you allow yourself to be overcome by liquor on such a night as this, you will lose your place." "Mr. Joseph," began Giles indignantly, but he quailed before the evil eye fixed fiercely on his and withdrawn, muttering to himself. Joseph, what does this mean?" faltered Mrs. Chester, rising to her feet, as pale as death. "Mother, do not let yourself be so disturbed. It's a foolish fancy of old Giles's. I'll tell you that Richard died in Rome 18 years since." That his firm hand quivered, nevertheless, and there was a cold, damp sweating oozing from his coagulated forehead. Even as he spoke, a footstep echoed on the threshold, and Richard Chester, with the child clinging to his hand, stood before them. He, whom they supposed had long slumbered cold and stark in his far-off grave. The mother advanced a step, trembling. What intuition told her was that this was no ghost, but a living reality. In another instant her favorite child was clasped to her heart. "Mother, I've come back to you once more. Will you not send me away again?" "Never, never. How could you suppose it? Joseph's word was my decree of exile, and Joseph told me you had been dead 18 years. He saw you in your coffin when he was at Rome." Richard Chester turned, with burning forehead, to seek the villain who had usurped his patrimony and blighted his life's most cherished hopes. But Joseph was gone, dizzy, faint, reeling as he had crept from the room when first the living contradiction to his skillfully laid plots had crossed the doorstone, and instinctively he sought his own apartment above. "Where's that cunning drug?" he murmured, "for I need all my senses now, and the walls swim around me, to be taken to nerve the mind and clear the brain. Yes, yes." He crept to a heavy oaken desk and felt blindly for some secret spring. It was a dark apartment, illuminated only by the fitful glow of a sea-coal fire, and rendered still more gloomy by its thick hangings, and the dark veined wood of its furniture. The spring yielded to his touch, and he drew out a tiny rosewood box, filled with the most invisible phials. Reposing in their crimson satin nooks, he took a wineglass from the mantel, poured it half full of water, and shook a single drop from one of these vials into it. A dull purple hue enstrained the clear element. He raised it to his lips, drained its contents, and the next instant fell dead. They were subtle, deadly drugs, and for some good and for some ill, but his eyes were dim and his hand trembled, and he had mistaken the vial. The dull, heavy fall roused the group below. As they hurried up, stood pale and silent around the corpse. In that hour they forgot all the wrongs of all the years, and all the woes wrought by the pulseless brain, and only grief and pity and forgiveness stirred in their hearts, while the mild stars of Christmas Eve looked in through the softly tinted medallions of the stained windows, and the wind moaned sadly through the leafless trees. The hour of retribution had come.
Dun, dun, dun. So, a little bit of a twist on a ghost story per se. A case of mistaken ghost, if you will. But,
Or flat out lie to inherit.
yes, there's that as well. But, nice little creepy chill of a story. A little dark.
Santa came early.
Yes, a little bit of a dark Christmas, if you will.
Or was that Krampus?
That may have been Krampus meddling in things. Just a smidge. Justifiably so. Although even Krampus usually stuck with the switches. Quack, quack.
I mean, we could go to Norway and the gnomes.
Okay. What do we leave?
Hey buddy, we need a passport for you.
Alright, so that was story for number 1 for us this evening. We do have one more story for you tonight. And this one is a similar name. It is The Ghostly Christmas Gift. This one by F.H. Brunell. Now the F stands for Frank. And Mr. Frank Brunell, who lived from about 1852 till 1933, was a founder of the groundbreaking horse racing newspaper, The Daily Racing Form. He was a sports writer and secretary of an early baseball players' union and league. And this story appeared in a paper for which he had also served as sports editor, the Cleveland Plain Dealer, on December 25th, Christmas Day of 1887. And it delivers on its narrator's belief that ghosts should not be commonplace. Now, I will say, I don't think ghosts should be commonplace per se. Ghosts are kind of special.
They are special.
I mean,
They've earned it.
They have earned it, exactly. There are ghosts and spirits all over the place, but I think that they got that extra little bit of notoriety, extra little bit of specialness to them. So, anyways, I do digress. Some tales are best not told. Until today, with an assignment to contribute to the Christmas Plain Dealer staring me very hard in the face, I had held this idea of a story that I am going to tell. But in sketching the past, real and imaginative, for an incident out of which a tale and my task could be accomplished, I hit on this, the strangest story that I ever heard connected with mortal man. It didn't happen to me, for which I am glad, but I knew the man whose life was wounded with its weird incidents, whose soul was warped by the mysterious visitations taken, as he firmly believed, as penance for a revengeful act, and whose death was dramatic to a degree of mysterious atrocity. It is perhaps one of the oddities of literature and its connection with humanity that Christmas is essentially a season of ghosts. And it has always seemed an oddity to me that there should be such a lack of oddity about a typical ghost. And if that is the right term, and a ghost can be typical, there doesn't seem to be any particular reason why ghosts should be so commonplace. Very few of the literary and reminiscent specters with which I have been acquainted, I am glad that the connection has been no closer, have been dull, thin and melancholy wraiths without light or mellowness, and certainly lacking anything that could be galvanized and called humor. There have been fat ghosts and jolly ghosts, if there have been any ghosts at all, and some shades or lights. There is no reason why spirits should be libeled as a shade that have returned their earthly smiles. At least there should be if there are not, and considering the face, which is unquestioned if we admit the other fact of ghostly existence, that ghosts stay out late o' night and are light of foot, jollity and variety must lurk within their airy breasts. If ever I run against a spirit and I am not too startled to use my facilities, I shall, for the good of literature and verbal tales of the future, draw it out, note the peculiar of the spectral mind, and peer through its conversation for a piece of fancy or a flash of humor. But perhaps it will be as well for a literary illusionist, and to the man or woman of imagination all is possible, to paint or pen a ghostly hood or a spectral heart better than natural acquaintance with such a ghost would serve to establish it in the records. And this notion seems most viable when I consider the power of such creation and the possible weakness of actual creation. After all, both would be airy, and neither could be put under the set and austere eye of the microscope or dissected by the logical and exposing examination of your materialistic investigator. And at the present stage of the human game, a fanciful pretty is of more account than a home fact. But this is not telling my story. Having never seen a spirit myself and holding no energetic desire to see one, I can but say that I believed the story that John Fleming told me, because I believed in John Fleming. Faults he had, what man has not, but he was built on very fine mental and physical lines, and if I am deceived, it was only because he too was the victim of a morbid fever that gripped his life away, and because there were unmistakable evidences, to me, of the influences of that which wrought his ruin, we were entirely different. My life had been in the town, where civilization asserts itself and claims supremacy. Of course, such a habitation forces itself into the humanity it holds and surrounds, but John had been a wanderer from his youth, and had seen the four corners of the world, and profited by what he had seen. I had known him as a young man when my school days were beginning. Later, as the brawny and bronzed lion of our small town when I was on the brink of college, and he resting restlessly between jaunts to the other end of the world. In his youth, Fleming had been a little wild, and the stories connected with him had made him the bane of the mothers of the beauties of the town and the idol of their daughters. But as far as the town was concerned, nothing was seen of Fleming's wildness. I started for college and John for Liverpool via New York on the same day, and he shook hands with me most heartily as father and I left the train when our station was reached, promising to hunt me up when he came back. If I ever do, as he said with a ringing laugh. I finished my college work and began the more serious business that followed, but didn't see John Fleming again for 10 years. One fall evening, as I sat at my desk hard at work, a tall and spare man with bronzed and lined face and thick black hair, settled mustache and beard in which the gray was coming fast, strode into my room and holding out his hand said, "How are you, my boy?" I should have known the eyes if I had not seen them, and the voice had I not heard it in 50 years. It was John Fleming, but a different John Fleming from the athletic man I had left at the little railroad station in New York State 10 years before. We shook hands heartily, and he telling me how he had come from home to see me when he found out where I was from my mother. He inquired about my life and plans, and left me to finish my work, I having agreed to dine and talk over old and new times the next day.
When he had gone to his hotel, I could not help thinking, to great damage of my copy for the next day's paper, how much John Fleming had changed and aged and thinned. These thoughts were renewed by the damage of my sleep, which, when I reached home, the man seemed well, but there was a settled look of melancholy in his eyes and a corresponding ring in his voice that made me wonder more than I wondered over anything within my recollection. What had changed John Fleming? But I slept on the question into submission and rose at noon and hurried to John Fleming's hotel for dinner, and thinking perhaps I should find him more cheerful of eye and voice, that continued travel might have temporarily depressed him. But the man I met had the same melancholy aspect, and his manner sank deeper into me as I talked with him before dinner. There was evidently a pall of some kind on John Fleming. We lingered over dessert and of the old days, the characters at M, and we of course left the table, and John said, "Finish your work and come up tonight." I told him that I couldn't get away from the office until midnight. He said, "No matter. Come then, I shall be up." I ground out the usual amount of copy, and I left the office at 11:30 and gone straight to Fleming's room. He was up, and he was writing, as was supplying the insatiable genius of the daily necromancer, always hungry for a copy. As I entered, he threw down his pen and said, "My dear fellow, I'm glad you're here. That star has nearly frozen me to desperation," pointing to a particularly bright and twinkling star that shone through the window as if asking for admission. As I looked at the star, I was struck by the fact that it alone illuminated space. No other ray or spot of light stood out of the dark sky, and the star was very near, very bright, very nervous. But for the melancholy in John Fleming's voice, I should have been inclined to laugh at this peculiar appearance. There was humor in it, and in me, but mine was checked by the interest and curiosity I felt in John Fleming's depression. But the star compelled attention, and after 15 minutes silent smoking and eyeing fencing with it, I acknowledged its strange attraction and slashed the curtain between it and my eyes. I should be glad if you shut the cursed thing out, said Fleming, as the curtain fell down, wondering at such a remark. I glanced at the window covering and started as I saw the jagged edges of the star and the deep red outline in the curtain's center. As I started, John said with more intensity than I would have ever associated with his voice, "Ah, you see it too. That kills the hallucination theory and proves your interest in me." All this was puzzling to me, and my blood ran colder than it usually wont. The star and Fleming were evidently old acquaintances, and the peculiarity outline of the curtain, well, the stillness of the room, it affected me more than anything that had affected me up until that time. At last Fleming, who had been smoking viciously at this moment, a strong, big cigar, and blowing out huge clouds at the star's outline, as though to cloud it out of view, said, "The cursed thing. And so it affects you too." I said that it did, but not guiltily, said John. I started guiltily. Was it the shadow or symbol of a crime? And if so, who was the victim? Surely not John Fleming. I pondered in silence with the desire, but without the energy to ask the question. And the star twinkled malevolently on.
It was a very malevolent star.
Yes. I had become sure by this time that its twinkling there was spite because of the constant jerky movement. Human spite and malevolence is so... Well, it's thrown out, and it's always been my experience to find them more energetic than any other kind of tribute. My ruminations were cut short, though, by John Fleming's sharp question. "You do not see the face." "What face?" I asked him. He gave no answer, but the star's outline danced diabolically. At last Fleming aroused himself, and with a defiant glance and a shake of his fist at the outline of the curtain, before which menace the outline seemed to wobble and fade, and said, "I may as well tell you the whole story of my life, and that devilish star, and the more devilish face behind it. Could you see it? The face it would aid in substantiating my story. But you know me well enough to know that I will tell you the truth. Besides, men make confessions to ease their souls or their minds or what you will, and there's no ease in adding to the weight for 9 years, and for the life it took me at this time of my own is gradually going out." I shivered as Fleming said this. He laid his hand upon my arm and continued, "Hear me out. My act was heady and full of revenge, no assassination. It had men's approval, but never my own. You know how I wandered all my life, and remember the day, now 10 years ago, that I shook hands with you and your father at E in New York, and I went straight to New York, and from thence to Liverpool, and sailed from that town without a week's delay for Melbourne, Victoria. A party of us was to organize and equip an expedition for the Western Australian pearl fishing grounds, with headquarters at Perth at the head of the Swan River. The expedition started out with 4 vessels, 10 of us sharing in them, crew, drivers, and apparatus. But a storm knocked us all to pieces before we rounded the Point Exestrus, and the 10 bosses and 40 sailors and divers, but 6 and 18 reached what is now Albany. The rest went down with the fishing boats. By a lucky grab, I had managed to save one of the partners from drowning. I had never seen him until he had joined us at Melbourne, and told me that his name was George Wilson. He was a Californian, strong, alert, and evidently a man who had seen and acted a great deal. I took to the man after grabbing him from the hungry Southern Pacific, and he seemed to take to me. Sailors soon found work on the ongoing pearl fishing boats, fortunate enough to have escaped the gale, and 4 of the partners decided to go up and renew their fortunes at the Pearl Oyster Banks. For myself, I had had enough of pearls, so I found Head Wilson. At least he asked me to join him and return to America. He showed me the charts of a strip of country in South America where there was enough gold, he said, to make a score of men rich as Monte Cristo. Would I go? Yes, if I continued to think as well of the trip as I did then. But why hadn't he gone before? He said he only had the chart for a month. It had been given to him by an American miner who had died in Queensland of a fever in a Sydney hospital. After he had invested all of his money in the pearl fishing expedition, it would take £500 to equip and put us on the Colombian ground, where the gold was. I had the money and was satisfied with the explanation, and we hurried to Sydney and took the first Pacific steamer for San Francisco. We landed there in June, and after 9 days, spent fitting ourselves out and supplying the cash, and we took a trading steamer for Buenaventura, the United States of Colombia. After weeks lounging and outfitting and starting anew over the Andes, choosing a fertile pass for the route to Santa Fe de Bogota, another rest and another start, southeasterly over Lanciano de San Juan, and across the river to the strip of land 500 miles wide, southeast of the Colombian and northwest of the Brazilian line. Then claimed by both countries and had been given over to the desperados of each of those of any land that chose to wander from so far from civilization. We met plenty of gold, hundreds of gold, such as we were, on the road, and had to watch our riding and pack mules very closely. 20 days out from the Bogota, we began to consult Wilson's chart and found ourselves within a few miles of our gold ground. We found the valley and the old riverbed that were set down as our chief guides about the time that we ran across the motley group of prospectors as was ever gathered. There was a half score of the party, and it was led by a Chilean desperado. Such men or such callings are rare in South America. But the fellow, Juan Camigo, as he was called, demanded that we join his band and tell our business. Wilson, nervously furious, and I had not held him in. We made a fighting dash for it. But I explained to the brigand that we were engineers employed by the Colombian government to make maps of the debatable ground for diplomatic use, and I assured him we had no taste for a life on the plains with its horse and cattle stealing forays, as much as it might be to our interest to join the band at such a genius as Juan Camago. He was sinister, but he let us go unwillingly. An hour out, we found that spies were on our tracks and dogged us for 5 days, during which I made hundreds of imaginary calculations in my voluminous notebook, used a large compass and line for angled measurements, all while we pretended not to see the spies and ordering Wilson not to notice them. At the end of the 4th day, Camango's dogs withdrew, and at the end of the 5th, we stopped our mummery.
And after riding 10 leagues as fast as our animals could carry us, found a cave and lay in hiding for a week. Then we cautiously retraced our steps and were soon within the marks of our chart, with Camingo and his coyotes far away. 3 days later, in the partially concealed depression of the valley, evidently an old stream bed, we found enough gold and nuggets to found a monarchy or corrupt the world. It was pure metal and rugged and partially shining lumps, from an ounce to several pounds in weight. In 2 days, we had divided the necessities in our pack mules' burden between us, cached the rest, and loaded the spare animal and our own with between 400 and 500 pounds of the yellow nuggets most exposed to view. On the night of December 24th, we were within 3 days' ride of Bogota and a wild and arid plain. It was Wilson's turn to guard and mine to sleep. At midnight, I was awakened by a shrill neigh. I glanced towards the fire, saw the pack mule saddled, and Wilson in the act of mounting his own riding animal, and with the bridle of my own in his hand. In a second, I saw that he was about to desert me with the gold, and seizing my rifle, I drew a bead on him and shot him through the back as he prepared to jump onto the saddle. He never spoke a word or moved a muscle after I reached him. The shot was a killing one. Upon the blanket in which I was rolled, I found a note which jeeringly bade me goodbye and told me that I had served his purpose well. I buried him in the valley, divided the load of gold between the two mules, and pushed on to Bogota, and thence on to Buenaventura. At the later place, I boxed the gold and shipped it with myself to San Francisco, where I turned it into cash. It yielded $18,000. So much for the story of my relations with Wilson and the manner of his death. He richly deserved what he got, though I would rather have lost my own life in the Colombian plains than taken his. But I shot him on the impulse of the moment. The $18,000 grew and multiplied in California, and I am rich. That does not interest you. The strange part of my story remains to be told. Since the day I killed Wilson, his spirit and its symbol, that devilish star, and as he spoke, the star leaped as if in laughter and grew redder, has attended me. It has come between me and those I loved and is ever present. I have never rested in its baneful presence, and each Christmas day I find upon my table a lump of gold in the form of a star in which Wilson's features are impressed. See them. And John Fleming went to a cabinet and took from a case therein 9 shining and rough pieces of gold, each in the form of a star, and each with the features of a man sunken in. Each of the 9 was an exact duplicate of the other. I could not resist a shudder as I saw them, and a strange thrill or concussion as from a current of electricity passed through me as I lifted one from the drawer. And the shadow of the symbolic star leaped and laughed on the curtain, and though in malice at my terror. John Fleming buried his face in his hands and raised it as I put hand on his shoulder and said that he... "Oh, no, you do not see that horrible face beyond," he said with a shudder. "It is not for other eyes than mine. The star is visible. The face is not." I ran to the window and dashed up the curtain. There hung the star in the dark sky, yet out of it, and it was the only light on that sky's front. It danced at me and threw its bloody glare on the wall, but no face was visible. I drew the curtain down again, preferring the shadow to the star itself. It was impressed against my will as to its supernatural origin, but turned up the lamps and called for more light so as to drown it. The servant saw nothing, and Fleming told me that only those he loved ever saw the star, and none but himself the face. I bade him good night and went home to think, but not to sleep. I hardly got to bed when I was summoned by a message from the night clerk at Fleming's hotel. Something was wrong with Mr. Fleming. I hurried on my clothes and ran to the hotel and upstairs to John Fleming's room. He sat at the table where I had left him, dead. In his hand was a pistol, and through his temple a bullet. The star's reflection still danced on the curtain, and its origin was shining bloodily in front of the sky. I seemed to see the thin outline of a receding face also as I lifted the curtain, but do not know whether it was the recollection of the visage on the gold stars still hanging on me. And then the star faded out, and from that day to this, I have never seen it. On the table before which all that was left of John Fleming sat 2 letters. One was addressed to me. It charged me to see that his belongings went to his sister, and $18,000 was paid to local hospitals. He left me his watch and ring and the 9 golden stars. I went to the cabinet to see them. Their case was there, but they had gone. The ghostly Christmas gifts from the malevolent spirit which controlled the face and the star and marking the Christmas tragedy upon the Colombian plains had been taken back to that land from this.
Cursed gold.
Cursed gold.
Cursed gold. It's not Pirates of the Caribbean cursed
Nope.
gold, but it's cursed gold.
Hard to say that, John Fleming got himself into a rough
Pickle.
situation.
Got himself into a pickle.
Yep. But we do hope that you enjoyed our pair of Victorian Christmas ghost stories for this evening. And the next time we see you, it will not only be past Christmas, but it will be the New Year. It'll be January 1st. So, between now and then, we hope that you do have a very Merry Christmas and a Happy Holidays, no matter how you decide to spend it and celebrate it.
Happy Yule. Happy solstice.
Yep. And one thing I do want to mention, if you do want more Victorian Christmas ghost stories, we will be featuring them at our haunted dinner on January 6th.
Yes.
It is the last day of the 12 days of Christmas, so basically like Three Kings Day or the Epiphany, no matter whatever you want to call it. But it will be the 12th day of Christmas, and we will be closing out the Christmas season with one last set of Victorian Christmas ghost stories. Some of them you might find a little familiar, some of them may be a little new to you. Yeah, we will be doing that. It will be at Patrick Henry's Pub and Grill. Tickets for that are available on our website, hauntsofrichmond.com. You can go ahead, check it out, get your tickets. Tickets are very limited because we have a limited amount of space, and when they are gone, they are gone. But the tickets do include not only our stories for the evening, but you will also get your entree and dessert and whatever non-alcoholic beverages you want for that evening. So if you do want anything of the boozy sort, you will still be on your own for that. But other than that, once you buy your tickets, you are not obliged to pay anything else once you get there.
Yep.
Unless you want the booze. So we hope
you want to tip your staff.
Yes, and we definitely encourage you to tip the staff there at Patrick Henry's. They are wonderful people, have done a lot of great work for us, and they bust their butts for us when we have our events there. So.
Yep.
It's going to be a lot of fun. I am going to be posting that officially on the Facebook page and our calendar of events. If not tonight, then tomorrow. So you can keep an eye out for it there. But yeah. We've already
stop.
Yep, sorry. We've already sold a few tickets, so again, limited number of tickets remain. And yeah, that is basically kind of what we got going on. Aside from other than that, we got tours available every night.
We do have a tour going
tomorrow.
Tomorrow we've got one going day after Christmas so far.
And of course the weekends.
Yep.
So tomorrow night is Churchill Chillers. The 26th is also Churchill Chillers.
Because that's what was picked. Again, those were choose your own, and those are what people picked when they bought the first 2 tickets.
Yep. And this weekend is Spectres and Shades of Court End and Haunted Capitol Hill, I think, on Friday and Saturday respectively.
Yes.
So
that sounds right.
Yep. So yeah, we got a lot going on. But yeah, 'tis the season. And I'm trying to think. Anything else? Oh, might as well mention it now. Not only do we have the haunted dinner, but the weekend after that, which will be the 13th, January 13th, we will be returning to the John Marshall House for our the Ghosts of John Marshall House and the Spirits of Court End. So you'll get the interior tour of the John Marshall House, the spooky stuff with our friends at the John Marshall House and CPRI, and you will get an abbreviated version of our Spectres and Shades of Court End tour as well.
And then the weekend following that, third weekend of the month, we are going to be at Hanover Paracon.
Yep, Hanover Tavern Paracon.
So there are special VIP events on Friday night, and on Saturday is the full Paracon. Chris and I are presenting on a panel.
Yep, with a whole bunch of people
on Dark Tourism.
Dark Tourism. So there's going to be, we're going to be there. Our friend Whitney is going to be there. David from the Hanover Tavern itself is going to be there.
Mika from John Marshall House will be there.
Yep, Mika, a very good friend of ours from...
A couple of other people from not around here.
Yep, some other folks that do paranormal investigation stuff. So yeah, that's going to be... I'm trying to think. Feel like I'm missing somebody. I know that it's being moderated by our friend Brad Bradley with CPRI. So yeah, it's going to be...
It's going to be a busy weekend, and of course there is an investigation that night, so you can get tickets to that. Chris will be there with Lee. I will be at the Poe Museum for Poe's birthday bash and doing the Shadows of Shako tour for that.
Yeah, so I will say, we'd love to see a Paracon, but if the Paracon thing maybe isn't quite your thing, you can still stay very local here in downtown Richmond and go check out the big party that our friends at the Poe Museum will be putting on that Saturday for Mr. Poe's birthday.
Yes.
So lots of stuff coming up in January.
We're starting with a bang.
Yes, January. You think of it like, really? January? Yes, really, January. So yes, good to get the year off to a fantastic start, and we hope that you will be there with us as a part of it. And with that,
That is it. I've got a sleepy boy.
All right, we are going to wrap it up for tonight. Again, thank you for watching. Have a Merry Christmas. Happy holidays. Happy New Year. Stay safe and have fun. And
We'll
yes,
see you all on the 1st, if not the 4th.
yes, and always feel free to go ahead and drop us a line anytime. We are happy to hear from you. Have a good night, y'all.
Bye.